All right, so everybody, I am excited tonight to introduce our first speaker of the night, Calen, who will be giving a prepared speech, 5 to 7 minutes, and his speech is on science. So I believe it was called, and I kind of forgot, but he will be delivering a speech on science. So Calen, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. Now, without further ado, this is going to be a crash course on science. Now, science is all around us. It explains why airplanes work. And I'd like to ask a question of how credible do you find data that say germs are a primary source of disease, or gravity explains why an object falls when dropped, and how do we learn these things? But most importantly, what would be your approach to disproving them? It's important to note that if you don't understand something, you need to study it to be able to get a handle on it. Now, the scientific method was taught in schools, and it basically goes like this. You have a question, you research it a little bit, you form a hypothesis, you test with an experiment, you analyze that data, and you report the conclusions. It's been developed in the 17th century, so it's pretty old. And the important thing is it must be objective and free from the personal feelings or bias of the scientist, because it's submitted to a peer review. Everyone's looking at it. This is from Lumen Learning, and the only difference here is if your hypothesis is incorrect, you don't continue trying to prove what you want to be true. You try again, you form a new hypothesis, and no result is ever considered perfect. Here's an example of the 7 steps. I found this image online. Do mice grow larger if given vitamin C? So you give one group of mice vitamin C and you see if they grow larger and the other group doesn't get it. If one of the groups of mice is larger, well, then your hypothesis is probably correct because there are no other variables. Now, in psychology, the scientific method can provide explanations and motivation, provide explanations for interpersonal attraction, aggression, employee satisfaction, depression, explanations for motivations, intentions, and actions of human behavior with conceptual variables of interpersonal attraction, aggression, etc. And here are some of the variables that they would be measuring, say the number of inches that an individual places his or her chair away from another person. Now, there's a bit of a controversy that I realize, and that's when science changes its mind due to the process. If, let's say, aliens invaded today and we were trying to figure out what they wanted and we were running tests, well, you would have scientists saying different things about why they were invading or what they were, what their physiology was. And if it is disproven, it doesn't mean the science was wrong. It means the science is still learning. It's always building on that foundation. Now, anti-science is nothing new. Way back in the times of Joseph Stalin, there was a man on the left who grew wheat, crops, and maize, and he wanted to improve them. But the man on the right, Mr. Evil-looking guy here, had more faith in pseudoscience, and Joseph Stalin basically took the pseudoscience more seriously, and Nikolai was put in prison where he spent the rest of his life. Now, obviously, when science is inconvenient, it is put down and delegitimized by people in power. Now, climate change is something that's been going on for a very long time. We've known about it for a while, and I wanted to put this little note here that if you've ever heard of your carbon footprint, that was basically propaganda put out by companies that are contributing a lot more to climate change by basically saying, hey, you know what? If you don't recycle, if you use plastic straws, this is on you. But there was a recent video that studied the effects of individual consumption on climate change and found out that even if you stopped all your meat, everything, you stopped driving to work, you were putting nothing into the atmosphere, you would save 1 second off of the planet's lifespan. So it's really the big groups that were in charge of this. It's a little article that showed that Exxon knew about climate change 40 years ago. So As we see, the data is showing that averages are getting higher every year. It's starting to get hotter and hotter in places where it's used to be cold, just freezing, and atmospheric carbon dioxide has begun at the same time. Now, understanding this is based on the greenhouse effect, which was also in school. Basically, the Earth is surrounded by a field, and the sunlight hits it and is reflected back. Unfortunately, if it can't get through the atmosphere because of greenhouse gases, it ends up heating the planet over the long run. And the longer the more gases are released into space, the warmer the planet will get. And this eventually, it doesn't seem like a lot for a temperature to rise maybe 1 or 2 degrees, but the effects on the world are actually more significant than we think. We have more extreme events lately, increasing numbers of rainfall. And before I forget, when we talk about weather versus climate, weather is the seasons and climate is long-term. That's why if it's cold out, it's not disproving climate. It's basically saying that it's cold out, it's the winter. But in average, it's going to be hotter, even if it's by a degree or so. Now, some more facts. The ice sheets have started shrinking in Greenland. We're having glacial retreat and sea level rise, which not right away, but it will make coastal cities uninhabitable. And the ocean acidification is a big problem because, unfortunately, we're losing the coral reefs, which provide nearly 1/3 of carbon dioxide. So that's a picture of healthy coral on the right and dead coral on the left. Now, corals need many years to adjust to the warmer ocean waters, but that time isn't really there anymore. Usually the coral would kind of move, replant itself, and I can't remember exactly, but it had a way to deal with it, but it's happening too fast that it's just bleaching and the corals are dying. Now, in terms of climate change, how you would test this is by this. Not sure what OMG is, but basically they would survey Greenland by air and ship to collect ocean temperatures and salinity and take ice thinning measurements to help scientists better understand how the ice and warming ocean affect each other. They'd interpret that data over a 5-year period. And what they found was that the glaciers extend very far beneath the surface, which means if the ocean is warming, they're going to be melting that much faster. So that will also contribute to rising levels. And then finally, they published the results and put it in the scientific community journals. Now, here are some of the American scientific societies that agree with this, who have said that climate change is a real thing: the American Association for the Advancement of Science, American Chemical Society, American Geophysical Union, American Medical Association, American Meteorological Society, American Physical Society, and the Geological Societies of America. Now, in terms of destruction, we might not think people are dying yet from climate change, but if we look at pollution in China, people are dying a lot annually. Of course, it's also going to affect species which are dying out, fish and food, and the fact that the Earth has lost nearly half of all of its coral, meaning we're going to have a little less oxygen. And this is just some graphs of what will happen over time. Mass migration will be a big one. And here's a picture of people hiding during a heat wave in Portland. The fact that natural disasters are occurring 3 times more often than 50 years ago, and extreme flooding. Also, a little news story I found that Black residents of Glades, Florida are suffering through black snow, which is a thick soot in the air from the burning of nearby sugarcane fields, which is leading to high degrees of distress and asthma. So health issues are also true. Now, as for migration, what's going to happen is eventually it's going to become too hot to live places, and people are going to go from, say, Mexico and Central America to the countryside. They're going to spur a rapid and increasingly overwhelming urbanization, and they'll push the largest number of immigrants towards the United States. So from 1.5 million a year by 2050, to 1.5 million a year by 2050 from about 700,000. Now, in terms of COVID, that's a long presentation, but with the scientific method, they had to make a hypothesis as soon as they realized there was a new virus that was pretty prevalent. So they said, okay, all right, COVID is transferred by droplets like the flu is. So how do we measure droplets? Okay, well, we monitor the surfaces and we analyze if the virus is there. So they went to a super spreader event. They realized there were no surfaces there, or very little, and people were still getting sick. So they said, okay, we're changing our hypothesis and we're going to say something else and see if that's true. Unfortunately, when they did that, TV pundits attacked and basically said, they don't know what they're talking about. They said this, now they're saying this. And then that leads to the scientists getting attacked and harassed and their families because they think they're all in on some big conspiracy. Now, this is what the scientists said. Now we have new information that allows us to create a new hypothesis and start again to conduct experiments and learn more about how the new coronavirus spreads. Scientists are used to this process. We often make a hypothesis, find out we are wrong, and then suggest another hypothesis. That's how the science works. But the public was told to wipe down surfaces, clean their groceries, and not wear masks. Then the scientists changed their minds. The new prevailing evidence was that surfaces are less of an issue, but wearing a mask will reduce the amount of aerosols and droplets someone releases, thus reducing the amount of live virus in the air. Now, the anti-vax movement actually stemmed from this guy, Andrew Wakefield, who planned secret businesses intended to make huge sums of money in Britain and America from now discredited allegations. And he was shown to have callous disregard to the pain or suffering of children under his care and was guilty of falsification of data. Say, example, he said that the children that came into the study were normal and 5 had pre-existing conditions. The GMC said that he basically brought the medical profession into disrepute and no sanction short of erasing his name from the register was appropriate for the serious and wide-ranging findings of misconduct. Now, the problem with saying, okay, only 1% of people died is basically this. A lot of people come away with permanent heart damage, lung damage, strokes, neurological damage that leads to chronic weakness. And so it goes from 1% fatal to all these people dead and in serious trouble. Here's why I believe the vaccine works. Who went out to get it as soon as it became a problem? Everyone at the top section of government. They didn't wait until minorities and poor people went out and got it to see if they were going to be okay. They were in line first. More importantly, the ones who didn't get it, when they got in trouble, they had top of the line medical care. And unfortunately, we do not have access to that kind of care. Now, finally, this is tough to look at, but the proof that so many people are in trouble from this is on this website, which has compiled the list of every single person from news articles who has died from COVID. And it just goes on. And the thing in common with all these people is the story always says, I thought it was a hoax. I didn't trust my doctor. And they always say to their doctor, can I get the vaccine now? But the vaccine works by preparing your body for the virus. It doesn't work after that. It doesn't work to actually erase the virus from your body. So it's true. Yeah, it may just be only 1% chance, but there are a lot of factors. And if I can protect people, I really think it's a good way to go about it. I'm willing to take that risk. And I think 4 people in trouble or 4 people who reacted to a vaccine, which generally was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, is a lot better than something like this happening to me. And that is my speech. Thank you very much.
All right, Calen, thank you for that interesting speech. You gave a lot of information on a unique topic. Well, it was a very interesting topic. You went in a couple of different directions, and I enjoyed a lot of the content that you had in there. And hopefully somebody will find that useful and take action on something that they find interesting in that speech.